Hello, and oh boy, the voice is a little cracky. Hello, and what is up, YouTube? My name is G3Iron. I wanted to give you guys an update on some things and a quick discussion today about league mechanics and direction inside Path of Exile, as we pretty much all are waiting for Path of Exile 2 right now. Like, feel free to drop a comment if you're not excited for PoE 2 and you're more excited for just League content in general. At this point, I'm feeling pretty much burnt out on Path of Exile, except for PoE 2 stuff. Like, I'm just trying to be transparent here. I'm trying to be as honest as possible. I recognize that that's not going to be the hottest take out there, but that's just the reality of it. That's the way how I'm feeling. I look back over the last several leagues, and I'm starting to see a trend that's kind of concerning, maybe not concerning. Maybe concerning is just too grandiose. Maybe this is all just too dramatic. But it's nonetheless a trend. It's nonetheless a trend. Okay, so first off, quick update. I'm working here. We had the I'm working here. I had a poll that came out earlier this week. If you wanted me to make a video on a PoE mechanic, or if you wanted to talk about a game development concept inside Path of Exile, the winner, at least last I checked on the poll, was PoE. Game development essentially philosophy or game development ideology as it's applied to Path of Exile rather than specifically a PoE mechanic. So I've been working on this over here, this little discussion, which is just going to be called RNG in PoE, where we're going to talk about input RNG and output RNG and some other things like Chris's layers of RNG, what he's talked about at his GDC presentation, and then some implementations, some ways in which RNG is employed in Path of Exile, and some of the ways in which that's frustrating and some of the ways that that's helpful. So that's coming. I'm working on that. I thought, do you ever take a bite into something and then you realize, oh my goodness, this is much larger than what I thought? I was having a sandwich the other day and it was a triple-decker BLT. And usually when you have a BLT, you have like 2 slices of bread and then you got lettuce, tomato, and bacon, right? Well, this was a triple-decker. So it had bread and then bacon, lettuce, tomato, and then bread, and then bacon, lettuce, tomato, and then bread. So I like took a bite out of it and I was like, oh my goodness, it was all in my beard. It was all over my face. I realized it was much larger than what I initially anticipated. And that is what this discussion on RNG and PoE is turning out to be. It's turning out to be much larger and much more in-depth than what I initially had thought it would be in terms of the research. So anyway, so that's coming. But today I wanted to throw it out there to you guys as a discussion. This is the trend that I'm seeing. Okay, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm way off. Maybe there are mitigating circumstances and maybe there's various reasons for what's going on. And I think we can kind of presuppose some of those, or we can speak about some of them. But going back to Betrayal League, when 3.5 was announced, it was announced and teased as a big-time Masters mission rework. This was when Betrayal obviously was added into the game. This was when Katarina came out as the big boss. Oh, I'm sorry. This was back in 2018. Is it okay to say spoilers that Katarina is the boss of Betrayal? Anyway, so oh, Iron, I haven't finished my Betrayal safe house yet, and I didn't know who the mastermind was. Why did you spoil it for me? You know, insert Kermit. You know, upset, angry Kermit there. But Betrayal promised a rework of Masters missions. Okay, up until 3.5, one of the primary complaints amongst the player base in Path of Exile was the way how Masters missions were implemented, what they looked like, how they functioned, and how boring they were, and also how essential they were. If you wanted to get certain bench crafting recipes, if you wanted to have certain available actions to you as you progressed your character, then you had to pursue these daily missions. And so it was a very, very time-gated sort of approach to interacting with unlocking crafting. But with Betrayal League came Jun and Unveiling is worthy of a whole other discussion unto itself. I'm not going to take that on today. My point is, Betrayal League promised a rework of Masters missions. Okay, that was the promise. That's what they did. Synthesis, beautiful league. A huge, massive scope, right? Betrayal was a massive, massive patch, a massive expansion in its overarching scope. It was the expansion for the year, right? So there was the Betrayal League, but it was also the expansion. Huge overarching rework for all the Masters missions, for crafting and for how we were unlocking stuff in our bench crafting. It was a game changer, all right? Synthesis was also a not quite on the same scale, but a very similarly ambitious league. It was gonna change the way how crafting worked inside Path of Exile. It brought a new level of value to rare items. And then, of course, as we all know, and just take a moment to be sad. As we all know, synthesis is no longer really in a meaningful, measurable way present in the game. Yes, there's still synthesis uniques, and yes, there's still the occasional unique map here and there, but that's synthesis. Okay. Legion League was then considered to be kind of a dumbed down league at that point, right? It was much less grandiose in terms of its ambition, but after Betrayal and Synthesis. Synthesis were these, Betrayal and Synthesis were these massive expansion level Synthesis endgame and mapping rework and crafting rework. Betrayal, Masters missions rework, a new endgame boss to take on, and whole new ways of crafting and interacting with that, right? And then Legion came along and it was like, hey, just click on the pillar, kill mobs. Right? That was like the general outcry. Like, hey, GGG, we just want to kill monsters. We don't want to do all these mini games, and we don't want to have 16 other charts and 16 other tabs open all at the same time. Can you imagine playing Path of Exile where you just killed monsters and you didn't have 2 or 3 additional monitors pulled up with a trade website and then a cheat sheet and then like a how do I progress this, and like active, on-demand trades and live loading trades and live searches, and oh my goodness. Anyway, those were the days, right? Legion, low-level farming in Legion, darkness farming in Delve. Anyway, that was Legion, right? It was definitely swinging the pendulum of game design intensity the other way, right? Synthesis and Betrayal, very, very heavy, right? Lots of mini games, lots of expansion level content coming into the game. And then Legion was like, hey, there's endgame bosses and there's extra stuff to do. And there's a whole bunch of really fun stuff to do with these 5-way fights and with these new sorts of jewels that are going to drop. But the primary league is click button, kill bad guys in time, right? Blight League then came along, also added a pretty in-depth, interactable level of gameplay that was very different from the rest of Path of Exile at the time. Tower Defense League was kind of how it was memed about. It was again a pretty grandiose approach, trying to bring another game genre into Path of Exile that you could play, and it's still a very viable league starting strategy, is just to run blight maps and to farm blight maps. So very, very interesting. Then Metamorph came along. And Metamorph was basically, kill the Frankenstein monster, get loot, right? So we started to see like an alternating pattern of, hey, we don't want to do too heavy stuff. Like, we don't want to go too heavy on the really pushing intense gameplay, really pushing and redesigning a whole lot of game concepts all at the same time. Players don't like that. Players just want monsters. So we'll try to reduce some of the more intense minigame style aspects of things. And we'll just streamline it to killing monsters. Then Delirium comes along. Delirium's got its own set of gripes and ups and downs, and all of these leagues have got their own sets of gripes and ups and downs. But Delirium was definitely much more complex than Metamorph, right? In that it brought to us Cluster Jewels, and Cluster Jewels reworked. They did what Legion Jewels did for a unique jewel that you could, basically slot in here or there and maybe change a few things here or there. But Cluster Jewels changed the way how we all play Path of Exile. It did. Or am I being hyperbolic? Oh, Iron, you're just resorting to hyperbole all the time. Fine. Drop me a comment and drop your frog crab screams down below. I think Delirium, probably the outside of an Ascendancy, and maybe even beyond Ascendancy, I still think it's one of the most powerful core game mechanics to ever enter the game is Cluster Jewels. It's huge. You can redesign dozens of different characters and archetypes simply because of Cluster Jewels' presence in the game. So Delirium comes along, and it's a relatively large scope in League. Harvest then comes along, and is kind of like Synthesis. It's not Synthesis, but it's kind of like Synthesis in that it's got a grand scope for reworking or overhauling. There you go. For overhauling the crafting system in Path of Exile, right? SSF players love it. A whole bunch of different players love it. A whole bunch of players, of course, hate it. That's the reality of almost every single new aspect of Path of Exile. There's going to be a segment of the population that hates it. There's going to be a segment of the population that loves it. Yet, every single launch and every single hype cycle, Path of Exile continues to grow. So even though there's stuff that people hate, Path of Exile as a game continues to grow. Okay, so Harvest, Delirium, both pretty ambitious in their leagues. Maybe Metamorph and maybe Legion, maybe a little bit less ambitious than when you compare them with Synthesis and Betrayal. And then Blight is somewhere, Blight and Metamorph are somewhere kind of in between. I would say Metamorph is definitely on the least ambitious scale out of the last couple of years of designs. Just, it feels like there was more there that they were hoping to do with Metamorph, but they weren't able to implement it. And again, it was just a challenge league. It wasn't all of the other end game expansion stuff that came along with it. Okay, then Heist comes along, and Heist is again in that Betrayal Synthesis style, very new sorts of game concepts bringing into the game, right? New alternative mapping system, new alternative even leveling system, if you want to interact with it. Like, it basically added a whole other aspect of the game that wasn't previously there. 4 years ago in Path of Exile, players were screaming for more endgame options, and for the last 2.5 years, basically, Grinding Gear Games has been giving us alternative endgame options. Betrayal, Synthesis, even Legion 5 ways, right? Blight with all sorts of different sorts of maps that you can be farming. Metamorph, not so much, but Delirium. Look at doing, oh my goodness, 100% Delirium maps or doing simulacrums, right? Totally different. Harvest League gives you all sorts of different endgame options for how you're crafting. Not necessarily endgame encounters, a couple endgame encounters here and there, but primarily the way how you are building your character and interacting with them in endgame. Heist, again, whole other sorts of endgame that you can be pursuing, right? Then we come to Ritual League. Ritual League is basically click on a strong box and you can kind of see what's in the strong box. And depending on how you do in your progression of fighting these various strong boxes, you'll get different stuff in the strong boxes as you progress. That might be a really harsh criticism. Again, you guys can feel free to flame me down in the comments. That was Ritual League. It was glorified strong boxes in my personal opinion. Then we get Ultimatum League. Again, there's some end game to this sort of stuff, but both Ritual and Ultimatum, in my own estimation, are way closer to Metamorph in their grandiose scope of things than they are to Heist, Harvest, Delirium, Synthesis, Betrayal. Like, when you start to compare the design of these leagues, I think we're getting a lot simpler leagues. And on the one hand, that's great for a lot of players. A lot of players are asking for simpler leagues after so many different complex leagues. But I do think we're getting away from kind of a golden heyday in Path of Exile, where every single league was a massive game changer. And on the one hand, that was very, very difficult because it meant that there was a ton of new information that you had to absorb and a ton of new things that you had to be aware of. At the same time, that's why people play Path of Exile. People play Path of Exile because they want to do research and they want to min-max their characters and they want to find out, well, I only can make 400 chaos per hour if I do this method, but I can make 410 chaos per hour if I do this method. Like, those are the sorts of people who really like Path of Exile. Those are some of the sorts of people who really like Path of Exile. Others of us who really like Path of Exile are really like, okay, well, it's a 1 in 8 chance. It's a 1 in 8 chance or something for me to exalt slam this. But if I go and I tweak my harvest, and if I really farm this, then maybe, just maybe, I can get it down to like a 3/5 chance that it's going to land on what I want. I mean, these are the sorts of minute decisions that players who play Path of Exile really love, right? Being given these sorts of opportunities to interact with RNG. Yes, that's the discussion that's coming, but to minimize RNG and to really min-max their character and their approach to the content that they want to interact with in Path of Exile, right? That players love to be able to min-max not just their characters, but the content that they want to interact with Path of Exile. Ritual League and Ultimatum League and Metamorph all feel like there's barely enough content there for you to truly interact with something and feel like it's worth your time interacting with it when compared with the scope of what's been given with Delirium, with Harvest, with Blight, even with Legion, Synthesis, and Betrayal. I think what we're seeing here, and like I said earlier, I think there's a lot of different factors coming into play. I think Path of Exile 2 is a massive, factor. I think we can see that there is a lot of design energy right now that is not going into these challenge leagues. I hope, and I project, I give Grinding Gear Games benefit of the doubt, their creative juices are flowing towards Path of Exile, right? Path of Exile 2. It's not as though Grinding Gear Games is going to say, okay, for 6 months, we're just not going to make anything and it'll be silent. We're going to go radio silent. And then at the end of those 6 months, PoE 2 is going to come out, right? Path of Exile exists as a game with a very set schedule and a very set routine in order to keep support going and in order to keep content flowing and in order to keep players coming back. I get that. What I'm saying is when you compare all of these leagues over the last couple of years, you can see, if we were to do it as a bar graph, at least that's in my head, that's how I see it. Like you can see like the design energy of the designers going into each challenge league seems to be on a downward trend, right? That is not a critique of Grinding Gear Games. It's not saying they need to redouble their efforts. It's not saying they suck. It's saying I hope and I think that's because there's design energy and creative energy that's being put towards resources, human brain power and manpower and women power at Grinding Gear Games that's being put towards the development of Path of Exile 2. So I want to encourage us as PoE players. On the one hand, I think PoE 2 is going to be great because Grinding Gear Games has shown that they can do massive, game-changing, amazing things that last for multiple leagues, that last for years, that still hold our attention, right? Path of Exile can do that. Grinding Gear Games has done that and continues to do that. I think some of what's going on right now, though, is a definite regurgitation of some older stuff that we may remember. If you're new to the game, you might not even know it existed. So I'm going to show you a clip here. I'm going to jump over here and show you a quick clip. This is from Evalio Vasilev, and of course it'll be linked down below. This is from 2015. All right, this is an Elreon daily masters mission. What you do is you go into Elreon zone, you stand in a spot and you defend a spot, right? You defend a particular spot. It's the holy relic here. You see somebody, I don't even know what's he, yeah, he's using, oh man, split arrow, wow. Okay, so he's using a whole bunch of heralds and he's just blowing up stuff in his Elreon master mission, right? Here's my point. It's a zone of control. There's a timer that's going on and you just have to fight inside the zone of control while you kill monsters that the game spawns at you. Does that sound like Ultimatum? Does that sound a little bit like Ritual? Now again, the rewards spectrum and the way how the rewards go about things, yes, it's different. The rewards are different. The interactions there are different. My point here is the actual gameplay and the actual challenge is, like so many other things in Path of Exile, a clever reuse of resources. It is repackaging something that Path of Exile and Grinding Gear Games have already used, and then saying, okay, how can we tweak this a bit? How can we make this its own thing? And then go from there. I would not be shocked if we had a Haku-style mission, kind of remake for a league. Oh, wait, we kind of did have that. It was called Heist, where you would run to the end of a map, you would interact with something, and then you would have to make your way out. Haku, you had to be holding on to, whatever the tribal talisman guy or spectral ghost thing that was on you or whatever, right? With Heist, it was go and retrieve the relic or go and retrieve the contraband and then make your way out. We're starting to see, yes, Heist had a bigger scope than Ritual and Ultimatum, so don't even waste your breath complaining about that. The point is, GGG is now recycling the Masters missions that got reworked in 3.5. That's my point. You can look through the design scope of each of these leagues, and you can look at the old school Masters missions and just go, they took away the Masters missions, and now they're kind of like revamping them, revamping the reward system, revamping and tweaking things, and then going, here we go. Here's a league. That is not a complaint. That is an observation. It is not a complaint. Okay, Heist was probably where I made the best character I've ever made in all of Path of Exile. And up until then, Delirium was probably when I made the best character. And up until then, Metamorph was like every single league. I'm still enjoying Path of Exile. But I just want to put it out there as a point of discussion for us in the community. Like, we're seeing a lot of creative juices no longer coming out with the same level of ambition with challenge leagues, and I think that's primarily because of Path of Exile 2. That's my hope, at least. So I wouldn't be shocked if we had like a Katarina guard these minions. Oh wait, we kind of already had that with Delve, right? Like where you got to follow the thing. Um, anyway, it's pretty interesting. I just man, I really hope we never have vegan. Oh boy, vegan missions. Those were the worst. I lost so many hardcore characters to vegan missions. I remember once he leveled up. He leveled up as a master on one of my hardcore characters, and I didn't notice that he leveled up. And I went in and I fought him with a character that was not ready to fight him at that level, and he just did the rock drop move, and I just instantly died. It was just one shot, dead, lost hardcore character. I was like in my level 50s or 60s or something. It wasn't that high looking back on it, but at the time and at my level of experience of Path of Exile, boy, I was raging pretty hard. Let me bend your ear for a minute. Yeah, let me bend you. Anyway, hopefully this is some good discussion. Hopefully this provokes some thoughts for you guys. Feel free to drop me a comment down below on what you guys think. I definitely think there is a trend, there is a pattern here that we are seeing, and I would not be shocked if with the upcoming 3.5 or 3.15 patch, if we saw something else. Again, a clever reuse of previously used resources. That would be my pitch. That's my prediction of what we're going to see with 3.5. We'll see if I'm wrong. As I tell Mrs. Draconis almost every day, I've been wrong before. I'll probably be wrong again. Either way, I'm going to be excited for 3.15, and I will be looking forward to trying it out and making all sorts of discussion videos along with you guys. So thanks so much for joining us for today's discussion. I'm going to get back to working on RNG and POE and this discussion over here, and who knows when that's going to come out. This is turning out to be much, much more in-depth than what I had initially thought. But anyway, thanks for joining us today, and I hope that today is the day a Mirror of Calandra drops for you.